it's a good day to snuggle up with a book, so I'm going to keep reading. And this chapter is called The Fraidy Cat Cure. And I have Belle on my lap. She's listening, and you might hear a funny sound. It's Chica chewing on her bone. Oh, don't turn off my light, Mother. Please don't. Phoebe Jackstraw wailed. You know I'm afraid of the dark. Well, of course I'm going to turn off your light, said Mrs. Jackstraw. You can't sleep restfully with a light shining in your eyes. I can, and I can't sleep at all when it's dark, and I think that the bureau is a gorilla and the curtain is a witch and the lamp is a goblin. Phoebe, that's nonsense, said her mother, and she snapped off the light. Look, the bureau is just a bureau. The curtain is only a curtain being blown by the summer breeze, and the lamp, if it looks anything like it at all, well, it looks like a little lady wearing a hoop skirt. Okay. Well, just don't shut the door then. All right, I'll leave the hall door open, but I don't want you sneaking down and sitting on the stairs and listening. But I only do that because I'm afraid. Oh, Phoebe, how can you be afraid when you have 3 brothers sleeping right in the very next room? Boys are no help. All they do is tease me. Last night, Jeremy hid behind my door and jumped out at me, and I was so scared I spilled all my lilac bath powder. And old Chucky, he hides under my bed and pinches my legs. And Georgie climbs out on the roof and comes in my window and scares me. Well, nobody would tease you if you weren't such a fraidy cat, said Mrs. Jackstraw. Now kiss me good night and go right to sleep. Phoebe kissed her mother, but she didn't go right to sleep. She lay in bed as stiff as an icicle and looked around the dark room with round, scared eyes. She had forgotten to shut the closet door, and she thought she could see a thin, bony hand with long, curved nails reaching out and feeling around. Was she imagining it? Oh, no. There it was again, and she pulled the covers over her head. It was very hot and stuffy under those covers, but at least the monsters couldn't get her and kill her through the blankets. Then there was a noise, a raspy, scrapey noise over by the window. Oh, a robber was cutting the screen and coming in the window, and her gold beads and her wristwatch were right in plain sight on her dresser drawer. Oh! Suddenly from outside the window came the most terrible noise, a cross between a moan of agony and a cry for help. With a shriek, Phoebe threw off the covers and tore out of her room, ran downstairs, and burst in where her mother and father were playing bridge with the Murphys. Save me! Save me! My room is full of robbers, and there's one being killed right outside my window. You take her upstairs, Henderson? Please, now, said Mrs. Jackstraw. So Mr. Jackstraw drew Phoebe's cold little hand and led her upstairs into the robber's den, turning on her bedside light. Now, Chickabiddy, show Daddy all the robbers and the monsters. Well, first came this terrible bony hand with clawed claws. Phoebe pointed to the closet, shaking. Mr. Jackstraw strode over, opened the closet door, pushed it wide, and pushed at the hangers. He moved them from one side to the other. There's nothing there. Are you sure you didn't just see the arm of your bathrobe? It's white and it's kind of caught on this shoe bag here. See how it comes out the door? Oh, I guess maybe that's what it was. But what about the awful robber that cut my screen and that awful noise? Going over by the window and examining the screen, Mr. Jackstraw saw, looked carefully, and said, Phoebe, the screen is just like new. But there is a branch from the rose bush here by the window. I imagine that a breeze could make it scrape against the screen and make a grating sound. Now, what did you say was the other dreadful thing? Oh, the noise. It was kind of a moan and a cry, a shriek, a scream. Well, that's quite a combination, dearie. The owner should patent it. Now, where did this unusual sound come from? Right outside my window. Oh, Daddy, it was terrible. It made my blood all cold and lumpy. You mean all cold and lumpy like Sarah's oatmeal? Daddy, now you're making fun of me. Oh, dear. On the contrary, I'm just attempting to establish the facts of the case. Remember, I'm a lawyer. All right, but now that you've established the facts, what was the noise? I don't know, Chickabiddy. I can't see anything unusual out here except maybe your bicycle, which should be in the garage. Perhaps it's afraid of the dark, too, and was crying for you to let it in. Daddy, now you're being silly. Bicycles don't have voices unless they have horns. And the bony hand was my imagination. I guess I imagined that there was a robber cut in the screen, but I didn't imagine that terrible noise. It was kind of a moan and a howl and a scream and a cry all together. It was just awful. Well, Chickabiddy, there is nothing visible from this window, and it could have produced such a noise, but I don't see anything. I'll go down and prowl around outside if it will make you happy. Why don't you watch me from the window? I'll put a white flower in my buttonhole so you will be able to tell that it's me from the crowd of killers and robbers that are always hanging around this house. So Phoebe knelt by the window and shivered. She watched her daddy, wearing a white camellia flower in his buttonhole of his coat, and he looked behind every bush and tree. He walked up and down the street and even searched inside the Murphys' car. All right, baby, he called up to her. Hop in bed. All the screamers, howlers, and wailers seem to have gone home. So Phoebe got into bed and turned off her light and was just about to sleep when she heard, whoo, 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 a woo, ee, yoo, came the terrible noise. Like a bullet, she shot out of bed and took the steps 2 at a time, and in a moment leapt into her daddy's arms. The noise, Daddy, the terrible noise, listen! And they listened. And sure enough, they could hear a strange noise. It was sort of a cross between a wail, a moan, a howl, and a scream, and a little growl. Dumping Phoebe off his lap, Mr. Jackstraw strode over and opened the front door, and then he began to laugh, and he called, Come here, everybody. Here's the culprit. They all ran to the door, and there, sitting in a pool of moonlight, was a red and white dog howling at the moon. Oh, that's the Westcott's pointer. They have gone on a little trip, and they asked me to feed and water him. I guess he was lonely and followed us home. Come on, Bobo, come on. The hunting dog turned and gave Mrs. Murphy a sorrowful look, tilted his head back, and let forth the most mournful, most agonized and heart-rending wail that everyone could have ever imagined. Then he walked slowly over and lay down under the Murphys' car. Oh, so that's why I couldn't find you before, said Mr. Jackstraw. All right, old boy, lie under the car if you want, but please don't sing any more. Phoebe can't stand your voice. Woof, woof, woof. And he rested his head on his paws. Giving Phoebe a hug, Mr. Jackstraw said, Now that I've caught all your killers, robbers, and monsters, do you think you could go to bed by yourself now, Chickabiddy? Yes, but I'm awfully hungry. Do you suppose I could have a peanut butter sandwich and a glass of milk? Certainly, but please take it upstairs with you. Now scoot, said Mother. So Phoebe scooted. After she had eaten her sandwich and her milk, she fell asleep and didn't wake up until she heard Jeremy, Georgie, and Chucky fighting over the catcher's mitt. At breakfast, Georgie said, Hey, Phoebe, what was that bellering I heard in your room last night? I never heard so much noise. Screaming and yelling and bawling. What happened? Did you see your own shadow? Hey, I didn't hear anything. Was it a bear? Said Jeremy. Chucky, who was only 3, said, Bears don't come in houses. Bears live in the woods, don't they, Daddy? There is nothing that upsets my stomach as much as having to listen to childish prattle of my brothers. Now, would you excuse me if I didn't eat my oatmeal, Mother? No, no, I wouldn't, especially as today is the day of Imogene Haversack's birthday party, and you'll probably stuff yourself full of candy and ice cream. Oh, Imogene's party! I forgot all about that. May I wear my new pink dress, Mother? Well, I don't see why not. Oh, Mumsy, can I wear my blue silk? Said Georgie. I do look so pretty in it if I'm ever the biggest scaredy cat in the whole of the United States of America. Georgie, eat your cereal and stop teasing your sister. More scrambled eggs, dear? No, thank you, Eloise. I am just going to read my paper and, oh, I'd like a little more coffee. It's right there beside you, said Mrs. Jackstraw. Now, if you would only take your eyes off your paper for a moment, you would see it. I did see it. Mr. Jackstraw, not taking his eyes off the paper, groped for the sugar bowl. Georgie handed it to him and then watched with delight as his father put 4 teaspoons of sugar into Georgie's cocoa, put 4 teaspoons of sugar in Georgie's cocoa and stirred his own black coffee vigorously, then picked up the cream pitcher and took a sip. With a splutter, he put down his paper for a minute to see what was going on. And Mrs. Jackstraw seized the opportunity to say, Henderson, dear, I must have the car today. Oh, so sorry, but I must have it. I have to drive into Greenbrier to interview a witness. Oh, dear. Well, then Phoebe can take the bus to Imogene's party. The bus? Oh, Mother, I couldn't. I don't know how. What do you mean you don't know how? You're not going to steer the bus. You're just going to ride it, said her brother Georgie. Oh, be quiet. Mother, please don't make me take the bus to Imogene's house. I don't know where to get off. You just tell the driver, Phoebe. Don't be a dummy. That's what I do when I go to Cub Scouts. I just say, let me off at Nickerson Street, driver. And he does, said Jeremy. Oh, but that's different. You go there every Wednesday. And anyway, Imogen lives way over in Blackberry Park. So what? Mom will tell you what bus to take and where Imogen lives, and then you just tell the driver. Oh, I can't possibly. What if the driver forgot me and I went clear to the end of the line? You get off at Imogen's on the way back, said Jeremy. Well, I'm not going. I'm just not. I'm afraid to ride the bus and I don't care. Phoebe stamped her foot and stomped out of the dining room. Putting down his paper, Mr. Jackstraw said, What's the trouble? Who's afraid of the bus and where's Phoebe? That old fraidy cat has gone up to her room to cry, said Georgie. Daddy, she's even afraid to ride on the bus, and I've been going to my Cub Scouts on the bus for ages, said Jeremy. I ride the bus once. Sarah took me to the market with her, said Chucky. Really, Henderson, are you positive that you have to have the car? May I please have it for today? I'm positive. But if there is something you must have, perhaps I can get it for you while I'm in Greenbrier. I should be back about 4 o'clock. Oh, but dear, I don't need anything. It's just that I had counted on driving Phoebe's to Imogene's birthday party. Well, let her take the bus, said Mr. Jackstraw, who hadn't heard a single word of the argument. But that's the trouble, Daddy. She's afraid to take the bus, said Jeremy. Mr. Jackstraw took a sip of his coffee, wiped his lips on his napkin, stood up and said, Well, I'm sure you can handle everything, Eloise.